body and mind of the system, all control structures, perceived, felt, torn apart, pressures. Sorcerers and wizards, consulted. Officialdom, revert to bad habits. Markets, destruction. Okay, those are the key words. Now I'll read the graph with the narrative as Clif and George have put it together. The data suggests that sorcerers and witches, by which we can assume pundits and reputed experts, technocrats, will be consulted in large numbers, and many reforms will be proffered in attempts to find what works. From the point at which the officialdom becomes daily engaged, which the data suggests makes things a whole lot worse, the rising attribute sets are in support of rigid, stiff system, and danger and rigidity, which brings breaks and cracks in the system. The cracks in the system are further supported as being critical, or even at a critical juncture. The data includes specific references to the heart of the system being stifled. Further, the data includes support from wringing out of system all bad habits. These bad habits are specifically to be visible with some of this language. This is seemingly important as a temporal marker in that it will precede the first visible evidence of the death of the dollar. The data sets accruing then forecast a period of 3 days from the renunciation wringing out of the bad habits, in which the body and mind of the system, all control structures, will be perceived, felt to be torn apart by the pressures. There is then data which suggests that sorcerers and wizards will be consulted just before the officialdom decides to revert to bad habits. This is then the temporal marker for the last third of the market's destruction. That's again another powerhouse paragraph. Wow. All right. Quoting from Part 6 of the Alta Report's latest issue. You can all subscribe to this and study it. And reading it 2 or 3 times makes it even all the more clear. All right, back with much more with Clif High and his partner, of course, George Ewer, behind this amazing work at halfpasthuman.com. Okay, halfpasthuman.com is the website. Clif High is the guest, and we'll move through some of these other short excerpts I pulled from Part 6 of the current Alta Report. Okay, I'll go back to the original way of doing it. I'll note the quote before you hear it. The Summer of Hell, 2009, which has been appearing in our data for over a year now, is still being defined at the core descriptor sets as being of, quote, default, end quote, which is to say the, quote, death of the full faith and credit of the USA government, end quote, and the, quote, default of, by and to the Federal Reserve banksters, end quote. This, quote, death of the dollar does not catch many by surprise, but nonetheless, when the dying elephant finally rolls over, the ground all around shudders. In this case, the most dangerous of times of, quote, emotional stress at the international level will come from very late spring 2009 through to the fall. The indications are that the, quote, collapse of the USA dollar and the, quote, repudiation of all obligations, end quote, by the, quote, ruling elite government of the USA Bilderbergers, end quote, including all of the, quote, expected social contract, end quote, will cause the plunge, quote, plunge into the release language phase of the, quote, revolution meme here in the US of A. Again, the key words, default, death of the full faith and credit of the USA government, default of, by, and to the Federal Reserve banksters, death of the dollar, emotional stress, collapse of the USA dollar, repudiation of all obligations, ruling elite government of the U.S. of A. Bilderberger, expected social contract, plunge, revolution. Those are the key words that the narrative was written around. Clif, maybe we should kind of go on vacation here for a while.
Yeah, as long as we can get off planet, it's not just.
There's nowhere to hide. That's the bottom line here, and that's absolutely true.
And really, there's no point. Every person's destiny is their own. We're obviously here because we wanted to be, regardless of what anybody may say. Yeah, you're here working out some element of your personal karmic history at this particular time.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's a horrid way to think about it, but it's like, take a good perspective and perceive the moment for what it is and the challenges involved.
I don't think that paragraph requires too much elaboration. I mean, it's talking about the summer of hell, 2009.
It's going to cause instant problems. What few people realize is how dependent the entire planet is upon the dollar, and the immediate effects of the dollar collapse are calamitous, not to the people in the United States the way everybody thinks, but instantly. Currently at this point on our planet, we've got over 6 billion people. A third of them, 2 billion plus people, live on $2 a day or less. When the dollar collapses, those people will be driven into the abject poverty of trying to make a living on maybe 50 cents or less a day. But an additional 2 billion people, so 2/3 of the planet, will be plunged down to that $2 a day or less living standard. Many of these people will now be in the northern hemisphere, whereas that had not been that true before.
Right.
And so this is going to be a horrific planetary problem. And I can see to a certain extent, that maybe there's messages within Biden's statement, certain allusions to perhaps a potential intervention in the way they intervened into, Kennedy's brain, that kind of thing. So there may be hidden nuances of threat, but there's also a very legitimate concern, even on the face of it, if the guys are legit. If you just gave them the benefit of the doubt, in spite of the fact that they're politicians and obviously trained to lie very well, they would obviously still also recognize the same kind of situation that we're in, and their advisors cannot be, let's hope, too much more stupid than I am. And if I'm picking it up, they ought to know about it, and so they need to make the kinds of plans that an adult is going to make when faced with these kinds of situations. And there's where we get into the rub of the whole thing, because we all have to stand up and accept our responsibility in this as adults. We can't go whining and say, oh, my entitlements, my entitlements, my entitlements. No, because the whole world has suddenly changed, and your entitlements just went poof because you were sold a bill of goods in the beginning and gave your power away. You don't have entitlements. You have what your personal responsibility is able to provide for you, and people had better start thinking that way really quick. That's part of our effort here, is not to make tons of money and be wealthy because it's a curse. Money is a curse mentally, and I won't go into it, but our real effort here is to try and open people in terms of their mental perspective on what's coming down the road to them and how they participate in it. We don't have much in the way of control over circumstance. Anybody that suggests otherwise is delusional and naive. Humans really only control one single thing, and that is their attitude about any given set of choices they have to make. So given that, I personally would prefer to live with a whole lot of adults on the planet who have a good attitude about the adversities that we all face and the challenges ahead, as opposed to a bunch of whiny kids. They're going to cause problems and throw fits. And so we try and provide enough information to sort of take the edge off.
Well, you've taken something off here. I don't know if it's the edge or not, but that's one hell of a compilation of words and phrases, which when you think about them,
and they have gotten very much more in the vein of grim and dire since the last 2 years. Yeah.
Well, death of the dollar, emotional stress, collapse of the U.S. of A. dollar.
And we can see exactly how the mechanism will play out now. Because here we are with a lockdown, with an officialdom is desperately trying to pry open. The only thing they can use to pry it open is an endless stream of digidollars. They're hell-bent on creating these digidollars as fast as they possibly can.
Cyber dollars,
They don't really exist. They're just illusionary. However, they've got to be intruded into the system one way or another. And so the crack may very well relate to so much pressure put in by so much dollars being forced in that instead of mere hyperinflation, we get the crack-up boom of the Austrian school where it all happens at once, and instantly the Dow rises to 25,000. But it's kind of like sort of a double curse, or it's kind of a curse there, because 25,000 times nothing is still nothing.
Sure is. That's fascinating. I mean, just reading some of these expressions are amazing. Repudiation of all obligations.
Which they'll have to do. They won't be able to support Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and I don't want to frighten people, but they must be realistic.
Now, we're not talking about derivatives here. They're talking about government-supplied and provided obligations.
The derivatives so outweigh the total financial
It can't.
health of the planet.
At least 16 times the total GDP. And those derivatives are all worthless, useless, absurdly valueless pieces of...
and look what they're trying to do. They're trying to pump and restart the whole thing again, and they want everybody to start rushing out and buying houses all over again. Somebody's really going to buy those mortgages now? I don't think so.
Not either. Be right back. Okay, a couple more excerpts from Part 6, and then we're going to tell you how to get your own copy in a few minutes with Clif. halffasthuman.com is the website. All right, here's the next one. Remember, these are they're in sequence, but they're spaced out. They're excerpts from throughout the report. Living in